The Bhagavad Gita and its philosophical teachings. Part 1. Arjuna's Dilemma. What happens when a warrior lays down his bow? The Bhagavad Gita begins in the tension of a battlefield, where the warrior Arjuna is confronted not just by enemies, but by a profound moral and existential crisis. As the armies prepare for battle at Kurukshetra, Arjuna sees his kin, teachers, and friends aligned on both sides. Overwhelmed by sorrow and confusion, he lays down his bow, refusing to fight. This gesture becomes more than just a physical act of withdrawal. It becomes the opening of a spiritual conversation that touches on duty, righteousness, fear, and identity. Arjuna's paralysis in the face of violence against his own people sets the tone for the entire dialogue, initiating questions about action, ethics, and what it means to live rightly in the world. Arjuna's dilemma is both deeply personal and universally human. He is not merely afraid of death or injury, but is tormented by the idea of killing those he loves and respects. His inner conflict is between the demands of Dharma, his sacred duty as a warrior, and his personal emotional ties. To kill is to betray his affections, but to not fight is to abandon his duty. This internal war is reflective of the philosophical tension that exists when one's moral responsibilities contradict personal values. Through Arjuna's struggle, the Bhagavad Gita introduces the idea that righteousness is not always clear-cut, and that action cannot be separated from intention and awareness. The scene is potent because it contrasts two kinds of battles, the outer war and the inner one. Arjuna represents the person who must confront the chaos of life, while making choices that affect the soul. His refusal to fight is not cowardice, but a profound hesitation rooted in conscience. This hesitation is precisely what makes him a suitable student for the teachings of Krishna, his charioteer and spiritual guide. Arjuna's willingness to question, to doubt, and to seek clarity is portrayed as a necessary stage in human growth. The battlefield becomes a symbolic stage where the warrior must face himself before he can face his enemy. Krishna's response to Arjuna is not immediate condemnation, but a calm and transformative guidance. Krishna sees Arjuna's doubt as a sign of awakening and readiness for higher understanding. He begins to unravel the illusions that bind Arjuna, attachments to outcomes, identification with the body, fear of death, and the ego's resistance to duty. The laying down of the bow is therefore not weakness, but the beginning of inner strength. It creates the space for wisdom to enter. This is a moment that speaks to anyone who has faced uncertainty, moral ambiguity, or a crisis of purpose. At the heart of Krishna's teachings is the concept of detachment. He tells Arjuna that he must act, but without attachment to the fruits of his actions. To perform one's duty without being bound by the outcome is the path to inner freedom. This teaching challenges the natural human desire for results, praise, or success. Arjuna must rise above his emotions and perform his role as a warrior not out of desire or hatred, but as an offering aligned with divine will. In doing so, he would transcend the binds of karma and attain spiritual liberation. The Gita does not shy away from the reality of suffering, but rather places it within a larger spiritual framework. Arjuna's anguish is not dismissed. It is honored and transformed. Krishna leads him to understand that the soul is eternal, beyond death and destruction. The body may perish, but the essence of a being lives on. This shift in perspective allows Arjuna to see that killing in battle does not destroy the eternal self. While this teaching is controversial and challenging, it aims to free Arjuna from the fear that had paralyzed him. Action, when rooted in eternal truth, becomes a path to liberation. Another central idea Krishna introduces is the concept of swadharma, or one's own duty. For Arjuna, as a member of the warrior class, to engage in righteous battle is his dharma. Turning away from it would be a betrayal not only of others, but of his own nature. The Gita emphasizes that every person has a role to play based on their inner nature and circumstances. Fulfillment comes not from adopting another's path, but from embracing one's own with clarity and devotion. The refusal to act in accordance with swadharma, even for seemingly noble reasons, can lead to spiritual stagnation and inner conflict. Arjuna's crisis is also a confrontation with the impermanence of worldly ties. His grief arises from attachment to family and identity, both of which are transient. Krishna guides him to shift his perspective from the temporal to the eternal. This philosophical redirection is not a rejection of love or duty, but a deeper understanding of them. To love wisely, one must not cling. To act rightly, one must see beyond the personal self. Arjuna must learn to act from the soul, not the ego. This transformation is the true battle, and it begins the journey toward self-realization. Krishna's role as teacher is subtle yet forceful. He does not give Arjuna commands, but unveils layers of reality that Arjuna must contemplate. The power of choice remains with Arjuna, emphasizing the Gita's respect for free will. Even divine wisdom cannot replace individual responsibility. The spiritual path, according to the Gita, requires awareness, courage, and surrender, but not blind obedience. The warrior must not only act, but understand the nature of his action. This is the deeper significance of Arjuna's bow. Laying it down was necessary to question, but picking it back up with wisdom becomes an act of spiritual maturity. In the silence after Arjuna lays down his bow, the Gita offers a model of dialogue between the divine and the human. Arjuna becomes the seeker, and Krishna the revealer of truth. This conversation is timeless because it does not offer simple answers, but a new vision of life. It demands self-inquiry, reflection, and transformation. The battlefield becomes a metaphor for the moral challenges of life, and Arjuna becomes every person who must reconcile inner conflict with outer action. His struggle is not resolved through avoidance, but through insight and awakening. The Gita's brilliance lies in how it transforms a moment of despair into a doorway to wisdom. Arjuna's vulnerability is the soil in which higher understanding can grow. Krishna's teachings are not abstract metaphysics, but tools for living. They guide Arjuna to rise above confusion and step into his role with balance and purpose. The bow that was once a symbol of violence becomes a symbol of responsibility and clarity. Action, when performed with right understanding, becomes a sacred offering. This shift from despair to duty is the first step on the path of spiritual realization. Though the Gita is rooted in a specific cultural and historical moment, its philosophical teachings resonate far beyond it. Arjuna's hesitation mirrors the human experience in times of uncertainty, fear, and ethical dilemma. His journey from doubt to insight reflects a universal path of growth. The warrior's laying down of the bow marks a turning point, not of surrender to defeat, but surrender to truth. It signals the opening of the heart to knowledge that liberates, not binds. The real battle, as the Gita reveals, is not fought with weapons, but within the mind and soul of the seeker. In this foundational episode, the Bhagavad Gita lays bare the tension between human emotion and spiritual truth. Arjuna's refusal to fight becomes the gateway to a philosophy that integrates action with wisdom. The laying down of the bow is the dramatic pause before a revelation that will forever change how we view duty, self, and reality. It is the moment where conflict gives birth to consciousness, and hesitation becomes the soil for clarity. Through Arjuna's eyes, we are invited to examine our own struggles and to discover what it means to act not out of fear or desire, but out of truth. This is how the Bhagavad Gita begins, with a warrior who chooses not to fight, and in doing so, finds the deeper war that must be won within. Part 2, Krishna Reveals Himself, the divine charioteer unmasks eternity. When Arjuna lays down his bow and turns to Krishna for guidance, it marks the beginning of a revelation that transcends the battlefield. Krishna does not simply answer with strategy or motivation. Instead, he unfolds a vision of reality that breaks all ordinary limits of time, space, and identity. As Arjuna listens, the charioteer gradually unveils himself as more than a friend or guide. He is the eternal, the source of all that exists, the cosmic truth hidden beneath the surface of the world. What begins as a crisis of action becomes a divine encounter. Krishna uses Arjuna's despair as the gateway to transmit profound philosophical teachings that redefine life, death, duty, and the very structure of the universe. One of Krishna's central messages is the immortality of the soul. He tells Arjuna that what is born will die, and what dies will be born again. The body is temporary, but the soul, or Atman, is beyond harm. This truth is not simply offered as consolation, but as a foundation for spiritual understanding. If Arjuna can realize that the true self is eternal, untouched by death or pain, then the fear that holds him back begins to dissolve. The idea that life is a moment in a much greater continuum of existence allows action to be seen differently. To Krishna, recognizing the eternal is not an escape from the world, but the right way to live within it. Krishna also introduces the concept of yoga not as physical discipline, but as union with the divine through detached action. Arjuna is taught to act without clinging to success or failure, to outcomes or rewards. This teaching, known as karma yoga, becomes a practical path to spiritual freedom. Rather than escaping duties or abandoning the world, the yogi acts with complete presence and detachment, offering every action to the divine. This transforms even warfare, business, or daily chores into sacred acts. Krishna insists that renunciation of attachment, not renunciation of action, is the way to liberation. By dissolving ego and desire, one acts from a place of harmony and truth. As Krishna continues, he shifts from philosophy to revelation. He declares that whenever Dharma declines, he manifests himself to restore balance. This statement is one of the most famous in the Gita, revealing Krishna not merely as a wise teacher, but as an avatar of the divine. He affirms that he comes into the world again and again, not only to protect the good, but to guide those who seek him. The divine is not distant or abstract, but present and active in the unfolding of history. Arjuna is hearing not just ethical guidance, but divine testimony. The charioteer is also the creator, sustainer, and dissolver of the universe. In this moment, Krishna begins to dismantle all fixed notions of identity and reality. He speaks of himself as the inner essence of all things, of the light in the sun, the intelligence in the wise, the strength in the strong. He tells Arjuna that all paths ultimately lead to him, even those who worship with other names or intentions. This teaching expands the boundaries of spiritual truth beyond sectarian lines. Krishna is not a god among gods, but the source of all that is divine. The Gita thus reveals a philosophy of unity, where all forms are expressions of one formless essence. The divine pervades everything, and realizing this is the key to liberation. The most dramatic moment in the Gita comes when Arjuna asks Krishna to reveal his true cosmic form. Krishna agrees and grants Arjuna divine vision to behold it. What follows is a vision of unimaginable scope, the entire universe with its gods, beings, time, and death, contained within Krishna. Arjuna sees all creation arise and dissolve in him. He sees countless faces, arms, weapons, stars, and fires blazing in infinite form. He sees destruction and birth, terror and beauty all at once. This vision overwhelms him. The majesty of the divine is not gentle. It is immense and awe-inspiring. For a moment, Arjuna forgets himself entirely in the face of this cosmic reality. Arjuna's reaction is one of both devotion and fear. He realizes he has spoken casually to the divine out of ignorance. Now, confronted with the vastness of Krishna's true being, he bows in reverence and begs for forgiveness. The revelation humbles him, not by force but through clarity. He understands the insignificance of the ego in the face of eternity. This moment is not just about seeing God, but recognizing the falsehood of separation. The divine is not outside the world, but is the world, the self, and the ultimate witness. In seeing this, Arjuna begins to awaken not only devotion but also inner clarity. Krishna's revelation also introduces the idea of time as a divine force. He declares, "I am time, the destroyer of worlds." In this statement, he reveals that all beings are already bound by destiny, and the outcome of the battle is already woven into the fabric of time. Arjuna is simply the instrument of a process that is unfolding beyond personal control. This is not meant to remove responsibility, but to release the burden of ownership. Krishna teaches that the wise understand themselves as channels of divine action. When ego steps aside, one becomes aligned with the universal rhythm, acting without pride or fear. Throughout this discourse, Krishna emphasizes devotion as the highest path. While knowledge and disciplined action are noble, love for the divine leads directly to unity. The devotee who offers even a leaf or a drop of water with pure heart is accepted. The relationship between the soul and the divine becomes personal, emotional, and full of grace. Arjuna is encouraged to surrender fully, not in passivity, but in complete trust. This bhakti, or devotion, is not blind faith, but the natural response of the soul when it recognizes the source from which it came. Through love, the heart opens to truth beyond words. Krishna's teaching weaves together multiple spiritual paths, action, knowledge, and devotion into a single integrated vision. He does not dismiss one for the other, but shows how each leads to the same realization when practiced with sincerity. This inclusiveness is one of the Gita's greatest philosophical contributions. It allows individuals to follow their own nature while still progressing toward the same ultimate goal. Arjuna is not told to become a monk or abandon the world, but to spiritualize his existing path. The divine is accessible through every honest effort, and every moment becomes a step toward liberation, if lived with awareness. The revelation of Krishna's universal form also dissolves the illusion of individual control. Arjuna sees that even his opponents are already destined for death, and that his role is simply to fulfill his dharma. This is not fatalism, but an invitation to align with the flow of cosmic purpose. Resistance leads to suffering, while surrender brings peace. By offering all actions to the divine, one is freed from karma, the chain of cause and effect. Krishna urges Arjuna to act as a warrior, not for personal gain, but as a servant of truth. This balance of action and surrender becomes the essence of spiritual maturity. Through Krishna's teachings, the battlefield is transformed into a space of self-realization. The weapons, chariots, and armies become symbols for inner struggle and awakening. The charioteer becomes the guru, the guide, through illusion into truth. Arjuna's transformation is not from fear to aggression, but from confusion to clarity. He learns to act without being bound, to live without clinging, and to love without conditions. The divine self revealed by Krishna is not only within him but within all beings. This vision of oneness becomes the answer to all suffering and the purpose of every journey. Krishna also speaks about the gunas, the three qualities of nature: sattva, purity; rajas, passion; and tamas, inertia. All human behavior arises from a mix of these qualities. By observing and transcending them, one can rise above the limitations of personality and conditioning. This teaching encourages inner discipline and self-study. Arjuna is taught to act with sattvic clarity, without being driven by impulse or laziness. Krishna's philosophy does not deny the world, but offers a way to engage with it while remaining untouched. The spiritual path is thus woven into the fabric of everyday life, making enlightenment available to all who seek with sincerity. In the final stages of his discourse, Krishna again affirms the power of surrender. He tells Arjuna that all beings belong to him, and that by surrendering completely, one is freed from all sins and fears. This surrender is not defeat, but liberation. It is the realization that the self was never separate from the divine to begin with. The illusion of individuality fades, and what remains is unity, clarity, and peace. Arjuna, once paralyzed by doubt, is now ready to act. The divine charioteer has not only guided him through a war, but has led him to the discovery of his true self. By revealing himself as the eternal source, Krishna transforms the battlefield into a stage for divine knowledge. He shows that life, in all its forms and contradictions, is part of a sacred unfolding. Arjuna's crisis becomes the occasion for the highest wisdom to be shared, a wisdom that embraces both the personal and the cosmic, both love and detachment, both action and stillness. The charioteer who holds the reins of Arjuna's horses also holds the reins of the universe. To see him truly is to see all things as they are eternal, interconnected, and divine. Thus, when Krishna unmasks eternity, he does not remove Arjuna from the world, but returns him to it with new vision. Part 3, the Path of Karma, act without attachment, but how? In the heart of the Bhagavad Gita lies a teaching that appears paradoxical, yet holds transformative potential: act without attachment. This principle, central to the path of karma yoga, urges individuals to engage fully in life's duties while remaining inwardly detached from the results. Krishna tells Arjuna that renunciation does not mean the abandonment of action, but the abandonment of craving for the fruits of action. In other words, one must work sincerely and completely, but not cling to success, praise, or reward. This teaching challenges ordinary thinking, which often connects effort with outcome. Krishna proposes a deeper way of engaging with the world, where action becomes purified when it is performed in the spirit of offering rather than possession. The question that naturally arises from this teaching is how such action is possible. How can a person strive for excellence or fulfill responsibilities while remaining free from attachment? The answer lies in the understanding of self and motive. Krishna teaches that one must act from a sense of duty, or dharma, rather than personal gain. The ego, which seeks control and recognition, must be disciplined, so that the deeper self can guide action. When one works not for selfish reasons, but because it is right, then action itself becomes a path to freedom. The detachment Krishna speaks of is not apathy, but inner clarity. It is a way to remain steady amid success and failure, joy and sorrow. Karma Yoga does not demand that people stop caring about what they do, but that they stop being enslaved by desire for results. In this light, detachment is not a cold indifference, but a warm acceptance of the ever-changing nature of life. Actions, no matter how noble or necessary, do not always produce expected outcomes. By letting go of expectation, one protects inner peace from being disturbed by the unpredictability of life. This freedom allows a person to remain focused, effective, and emotionally balanced. Krishna presents this state of equanimity as the mark of wisdom, where one becomes like a calm lake, undisturbed by the storms of outer events. Another dimension of Karma Yoga is the idea of offering. Krishna encourages Arjuna to offer all actions to the divine, without claim or ownership. This spiritualizes the process of work. Whether one is fighting a battle, caring for family, building a house, or teaching a student, every act can become sacred when offered to a higher purpose. The sense of I am doing this is transformed into the understanding that I am an instrument. This shift is crucial. When one stops identifying with the role of doer, the burden of pride, fear, and failure begins to lift. What remains is dedication, sincerity, and inner freedom. To act without attachment also requires a disciplined mind. The Bhagavad Gita emphasizes the importance of self-mastery. A person must not be driven by impulse, craving, or aversion. The senses and mind must be brought under control through awareness and practice. Krishna compares the uncontrolled mind to a ship on a stormy sea, easily tossed and misled. Through regular self-inquiry, meditation, and detachment from fleeting pleasures, one can develop inner stillness. In that state, actions become free from selfishness. The mind becomes a servant of the soul rather than a slave to desire. Karma Yoga, therefore, is not just a way of doing things, but a way of being. The Gita also distinguishes between three types of action: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Sattvic action is done with purity, without attachment, for the good of others. Rajasic action is driven by desire, ego, or ambition. Tamasic action is rooted in ignorance, laziness, or harm. Krishna teaches that to walk the path of Karma Yoga, one must cultivate sattvic qualities. This means choosing actions that are uplifting, aligned with truth, and performed with inner calm. Over time, such actions purify the heart and bring the mind closer to wisdom. Detachment grows not from denial, but from continuous refinement of one's motives and awareness. Karma Yoga also involves acceptance of one's nature and role in life. Krishna tells Arjuna that it is better to fail in one's own duty than succeed in another's. Each person has a swadharma, a natural path based on one's inner tendencies, responsibilities, and life conditions. By fulfilling this role without envy or comparison, one honors the order of the universe. Trying to imitate others or abandoning one's duty out of fear or desire leads to confusion. The path of karma requires honesty about who one is and a commitment to grow within that reality. Detachment then becomes rooted in authenticity, not escapism. One of the profound implications of Karma Yoga is its relationship to inner freedom. When a person stops being bound by success or failure, praise or blame, they discover a state of peace that is not dependent on circumstances. This state is not passive. It is filled with quiet strength. A karma yogi is fully engaged in life, yet inwardly unshaken. Such a person becomes fearless, not because they avoid struggle, but because they no longer place their identity in temporary results. This freedom makes love purer, service deeper, and life more meaningful. It is a state where one lives from the soul, not from the ego. Krishna also introduces the idea that even wrong or imperfect actions, when done with a sincere heart and right intention, can lead to growth. The path of karma is not about perfection in outcomes, but about purity in intention. Mistakes and failures are part of the journey. What matters is the inner attitude. Krishna assures Arjuna that no effort on the path of truth is ever wasted. Even a small step taken with sincerity brings protection and progress. This message removes the fear of failure and encourages a life of courageous, conscious action. Each moment becomes an opportunity to act in harmony with the divine. In Karma Yoga, detachment does not mean emotional numbness. It means having emotions but not being ruled by them. A Karma Yogi feels compassion, joy, sorrow, and enthusiasm, but is not swept away by them. This balance is cultivated through mindfulness and devotion. Krishna encourages Arjuna to see the self in all beings and to act with kindness and fairness. Detachment, therefore, is deeply compatible with love. It allows a person to serve others without controlling them, to help without expecting gratitude, and to care without clinging. In this way, Karma Yoga harmonizes individual growth with collective well-being. A significant part of practicing detachment is observing the patterns of thought and behavior that tie one to outcomes. These often include pride, fear, competition, and insecurity. By examining these forces within, one becomes more capable of letting them go. Krishna reminds Arjuna that the body and mind are subject to change, but the soul remains untouched. Anchoring oneself in this eternal reality makes detachment natural. The more one identifies with the unchanging self, the less one is disturbed by the changing events of the world. Karma Yoga then becomes a practice of remembering who we truly are beyond roles, desires, and circumstances. The Gita also emphasizes that Karma Yoga is not limited to any particular religion, profession, or stage of life. Anyone in any walk of life can practice it. Whether a parent, teacher, soldier, farmer, artist, or monk, one can work with love, awareness, and surrender. The outer form of action may vary, but the inner attitude remains the same. Krishna's teachings offer a universal path that can be integrated into daily living. It does not demand renunciation of the world, but a deeper engagement with it, purified by wisdom. By acting without attachment, life becomes a sacred flow rather than a burden of expectations. Krishna also reminds Arjuna that the results of action are not in one's control. One can control effort, but not outcome. This truth frees the mind from anxiety and disappointment. When one accepts that the fruits belong to time, destiny, or the divine, there is a deep relaxation. One acts wholeheartedly, but then lets go. This letting go is not giving up. It is trusting the process. It is the recognition that the universe operates on a scale far greater than individual will. Such trust, born of humility and clarity, becomes the gateway to inner peace. The Karma Yogi walks with faith, not fear. In practice, Karma Yoga becomes a process of aligning the outer and inner life. It calls for commitment to action, but also constant reflection. One must ask, why am I doing this? For whom? With what intention? These questions guide the heart and purify the motive. Over time, the division between work and worship dissolves. Every task becomes a form of service, a chance to grow, a step toward realization. Krishna shows that even battle, when fought in the spirit of dharma and surrender, can become a vehicle of liberation. The secret is not in what one does, but in how and why one does it. To act without attachment is not to escape responsibility, but to embrace it more deeply. The Gita's vision of karma yoga is not otherworldly, it is profoundly practical. It invites the seeker to live fully, work sincerely, love wisely, and remain free inwardly. Arjuna's journey becomes a model for all who struggle with choice, fear, and doubt. Krishna's guidance opens a path where action and peace coexist, where success and failure lose their grip, and where life becomes a continuous offering to the eternal. This path of karma, when walked with patience and devotion, leads not away from the world but through it, toward the highest truth. This is how the Bhagavad Gita teaches action, not as bondage, but as the doorway to freedom. Part 4. The Path of Bhakti, Loving Devotion as a Shortcut to Liberation. Among the many spiritual teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, the Path of Bhakti stands out as the most accessible and emotionally transformative. Bhakti, or loving devotion to the divine, is presented by Krishna as a direct and intimate way to reach liberation. While paths like karma and jnana demand discipline of action and intellect, bhakti appeals to the heart. It allows even those without philosophical understanding or rigorous self-control to attain union with the divine through sincere love. Krishna assures Arjuna that anyone who offers even a leaf, a flower, or a drop of water with devotion will be accepted. This teaching removes spiritual elitism and opens the gates of liberation to all who can love with humility and surrender. Bhakti is rooted in relationship. It views the divine not as an abstract force, but as a beloved presence that can be approached personally. In the Gita, Krishna speaks not only as a cosmic deity, but also as a friend, guide, and lover of the soul. This relational approach to the divine transforms spirituality into something deeply human. The devotee no longer struggles to conquer ego by force, but melts it through affection. Krishna promises that those who remember him with love, especially at the time of death, will come to him and be free from rebirth. This assurance gives bhakti a power that transcends ritual, study, or austerity. It touches the innermost longing of the soul to belong and to return home. The emotional dimension of bhakti does not imply instability or sentimentalism. On the contrary, Krishna describes the true bhakta as one who is steady in mind, free from hatred, gentle, forgiving, and content. Devotion matures through practice into qualities that reflect the divine. The bhakta sees all beings as parts of the same Lord and lives with compassion and humility. Krishna praises those who, despite past mistakes, turn to him with wholehearted surrender. Such people are considered righteous and will quickly attain peace. This teaching places transformation above perfection and invites even the fallen to rise through devotion. Bhakti does not ask for a flawless past, only a sincere heart. Another unique feature of bhakti in the Gita is its inclusive nature. Krishna declares that anyone, regardless of birth, gender, or social position, can attain the highest state through devotion. This message was radical in its time and remains revolutionary today. It shifts the focus from external qualifications to inner sincerity. Whether one is rich or poor, educated or illiterate, All that is needed is a heart turned toward God. This democratization of spirituality makes bhakti a universal path. It empowers the common person to seek the divine without fear or shame. Through love, all barriers dissolve, and only the soul's yearning remains. Krishna also teaches that devotion can be integrated into every aspect of life. Bhakti is not limited to prayer or worship, but can flow through all actions. When a person works, eats, speaks, or rests with the remembrance of the divine, every act becomes a form of devotion. The devotee offers all that they do to God, and in return, God dwells in their heart. This sacred exchange transforms ordinary life into spiritual practice. Bhakti is thus not separate from karma, but enhances it by adding love to duty. The difference lies not in the action itself, but in the intention and awareness behind it. The path of bhakti also provides shelter from fear and doubt. Krishna tells Arjuna to abandon all other paths and simply take refuge in him. This surrender is not weakness but strength. It frees the soul from the burdens of self-reliance and control. In trusting the divine fully, the devotee becomes light, joyful, and fearless. The ego no longer fights to survive because it has found something greater to serve. Krishna promises that he will personally take care of the devotee, removing all obstacles and protecting them from harm. This divine assurance gives bhakti its deep emotional power. It is not based on achievement but on grace. Bhakti is not without discipline. True love demands faithfulness, patience, and constant remembrance. The Gita encourages the devotee to chant the divine names, to meditate on the divine form, and to keep the mind fixed on Krishna. This continual remembrance, or smarana, purifies the heart and deepens the bond between soul and source. The more one remembers the beloved, the more natural devotion becomes. Over time, the mind becomes centered, the senses calm down, and the inner world fills with sweetness. Bhakti turns discipline into delight, because every act of practice is colored by love. Even pain is seen as a form of grace, sent to awaken deeper longing. Krishna also teaches that bhakti does not reject knowledge or action, but completes them. The knower who understands the unity of all existence is still invited to love. The doer who performs their duty is still encouraged to offer their works to God. Bhakti brings warmth to wisdom and softness to strength. It ensures that the spiritual path remains balanced, humane, and grounded in the heart. Krishna says that among all types of yogis, the one who worships him with unwavering love is the highest. This statement places bhakti not as a side path, but as the crown of all spiritual effort. In the Gita, Krishna's own role as the object of devotion is central. He reveals that he is the source of all beings, the origin and end of the universe, the father, mother, friend, and beloved. For the devotee, every form in the world becomes a mirror of the divine. This vision transforms how one sees life and others. Every encounter becomes a chance to serve God. Bhakti dissolves the sense of separation between sacred and secular, between self and other. It creates a continuous awareness of divine presence, even in daily life. Through this awareness, the soul finds both purpose and peace. The sweetness of bhakti lies in its ability to turn suffering into longing and longing into union. The devotee does not escape pain but offers it to the beloved. Tears become prayers, and silence becomes communion. Krishna accepts all expressions of love, whether joyful or sorrowful. The heart, when opened fully, becomes a temple. In that sacred space, the divine lives not as a distant idea, but as an intimate companion. The devotee begins to live in two worlds at once, engaged in the duties of life, but inwardly immersed in divine love. This dual awareness is the secret of liberation through bhakti. Bhakti also teaches the humility necessary for true freedom. The devotee recognizes that the ego is not the center of the universe. All belongs to God, and we are but instruments. This realization brings simplicity, gratitude, and peace. One no longer needs to prove or possess. Everything is accepted as part of the divine will. Even setbacks and losses are seen as part of a higher design. This surrender allows the soul to rest. The restfulness of bhakti is not inactivity, but inner stillness amid life's motion. It is a calm joy that grows not from control, but from communion. The Gita's vision of bhakti is deeply relational. Krishna is not merely a philosophical principle, but a living presence who responds to the devotee's love. He speaks, listens, guides, and protects. This reciprocal love becomes the foundation of trust and transformation. The devotee feels held by an invisible hand, supported through all of life's changes. This sense of divine companionship gives courage in suffering and strength in action. It becomes a source of inner resilience and grace. Even when the world disappoints, the bhakta finds satisfaction in the remembrance of the beloved. This inner fulfillment is the beginning of true liberation. Bhakti, as Krishna teaches it, is not about belonging to a specific tradition or practicing fixed rituals. It is about cultivating the heart. Any path can become a path of devotion if walked with love. Any name of God can be chanted if it is done with sincerity. The divine is not limited by form or language, but responds to genuine longing. Krishna accepts all those who come to him, regardless of how they approach. This universality makes bhakti not just a practice, but a revolution of the soul. It removes fear, hierarchy, and division. It unites all beings in the one shared yearning to love and be loved. Even the intellect, when softened by devotion, becomes a tool for praise rather than pride. The Gita shows that knowledge without love can become cold, while love without knowledge can become blind. Bhakti balances both. It invites the seeker to understand the divine and to adore it. To know Krishna as the eternal self is liberating, but to love him as the soul's beloved is even more fulfilling. Bhakti does not deny reason, but embraces it within the larger wisdom of the heart. In this way, the Gita harmonizes all aspects of human nature, making the path of love a full expression of life. As Arjuna listens to Krishna, the teachings on bhakti slowly dissolve his inner resistance. He sees that surrender is not a loss of strength, but the discovery of a deeper one. Krishna becomes not just a charioteer, but the soul's true anchor. Through this relationship, Arjuna regains his clarity and courage. The power of bhakti transforms fear into faith and doubt into devotion. This transformation is not merely symbolic, but real. The battlefield does not disappear, but the heart now has the strength to face it with love. In bhakti, one finds the courage to act and the peace to rest. This is how the Bhagavad Gita offers the path of devotion, not as sentiment, but as a direct and powerful way to reach the eternal. Part 5. The Cosmic Vision, when Krishna shows the universe in his mouth. In the Bhagavad Gita, the most breathtaking and transformative moment arrives when Krishna grants Arjuna divine vision, allowing him to witness his universal form. This cosmic revelation shatters the boundaries of human perception and introduces Arjuna to the boundless nature of the divine. Though often symbolically remembered through earlier childhood stories, such as the tale where young Krishna shows the universe in his mouth to his mother Yashoda. It is on the battlefield of Kurukshetra that this vision becomes a complete and awe-inspiring philosophical statement. Krishna reveals himself not as a man or even a deity in form, but as the totality of existence, the origin and dissolution of all creation. This unveiling forces Arjuna, and through him all humanity, to confront the infinite scale and grandeur of divine reality. The moment begins with Arjuna's request. After receiving teachings on Dharma, detachment, and devotion, Arjuna wishes to see the divine as it truly is, beyond appearances and human limitations. Krishna responds not with hesitation, but with a solemn readiness to reveal his true form. He bestows upon Arjuna a divine eye, a spiritual vision not available through ordinary senses. What follows is a description filled with celestial imagery and metaphysical grandeur. Arjuna beholds countless forms, colors, arms, faces, and expressions, all contained within Krishna. He sees entire worlds, gods, sages, and living beings existing simultaneously in one boundless form. The universe itself is not just a creation of Krishna, but his body, moving and alive, flowing in an eternal dance of creation and destruction. This vision is overwhelming in every sense. Arjuna, who had seen Krishna as a friend, guide, and charioteer, now falls into reverence and terror. The beauty of the universal form is matched by its power and intensity. Flames shoot from Krishna's mouth, and divine weapons shine from his many arms. He appears both as the protector and the destroyer, encompassing the opposites of existence. Arjuna sees time itself embodied in Krishna, and with it, the destiny of all beings. He sees kings and warriors rushing into Krishna's gaping mouth, like moths into a flame, consumed by divine will. In that instant, Arjuna realizes that the war he is about to fight is already decided, already absorbed into the divine process of life and death. Krishna's declaration, "I am time, the great destroyer of worlds," crystallizes the core of this cosmic vision. It is a revelation that strikes at the illusion of personal control and free will. While Arjuna is still deliberating over the morality of battle, Krishna shows him that events unfold within a divine orchestration far beyond human agency. The message is not that action is meaningless, but that the individual is not the ultimate agent. Krishna urges Arjuna to become a mere instrument, to perform his duty without pride or hesitation. Action aligned with divine will becomes not only acceptable, but sacred. Arjuna's fear dissolves in the face of inevitability, and with that dissolution comes clarity. This cosmic vision transforms Arjuna's understanding of reality. No longer is he caught in the narrow frame of personal attachment or limited moral reasoning. He has glimpsed the totality, where everything is interconnected and held within the vastness of divine consciousness. This experience does not negate ethical responsibility. Instead, it places it within a larger perspective. Arjuna is still expected to act, but now with knowledge of the eternal backdrop against which all events unfold. Krishna's universal form shows that destruction and death are not ends in themselves, but movements in the ongoing flow of transformation. Life and death are part of one continuous breath of the universe. The symbolism of Krishna's cosmic form reflects core philosophical concepts of the Gita. It illustrates the unity of opposites, where creation and destruction are not in conflict but necessary parts of existence. It also brings to life the idea that the divine is immanent in all things, not separate or distant. By showing that all beings arise from and return to him, Krishna breaks down the illusion of separateness. The individual self, with its concerns and fears, is but a wave in the ocean of cosmic being. This vision of oneness is not abstract, but viscerally experienced by Arjuna, leaving him transformed and ready to fulfill his dharma with understanding and devotion. The Gita's presentation of the cosmic vision also serves to collapse the distinction between time and eternity. Arjuna sees the future already happening, the past still present, and all moments existing within Krishna's body. Time, which normally binds human beings to fear and desire, is revealed as an expression of the divine. This dissolves the urgency of clinging and resisting. If everything is already part of an eternal order, then action becomes a means of participation rather than domination. Arjuna is invited not to resist fate, but to align with it, to act as a conscious participant in the cosmic unfolding, guided not by ego, but by wisdom. In this profound moment, the duality between the observer and the observed also begins to fade. Arjuna sees himself not as separate from the vision but within it, part of Krishna, part of the cosmic story. This experience of non-duality underlines the Advaitic tone of the Gita, where the boundary between self and God is porous. Bhakti, or devotion, reaches its culmination here, not as a longing for something outside, but as recognition of the divine within and around oneself. Arjuna's surrender is not born of helplessness, but of insight. He bows not just to Krishna, but to the truth of unity that Krishna embodies. Krishna eventually withdraws his universal form and returns to his human-like appearance, reminding Arjuna that the true form of the divine can be overwhelming and not always suitable for the human mind. The purpose of the vision was not to impress, but to awaken. Krishna tells Arjuna that his cosmic form is rarely seen and can be accessed only through deep devotion and grace. It is not through mere study or austerity that such a revelation comes, but through a heart purified by love and surrender. This message reinforces the importance of bhakti, showing that divine knowledge is best absorbed when approached with humility and longing. The vision also redefines the concept of God in the Gita. Unlike the gods of mythology who possess specific powers and domains, Krishna's universal form is all-encompassing. He is not a deity confined to ritual worship, but the very fabric of existence. This universality expands the spiritual horizon, allowing each person to find the divine not just in temples or scriptures, but in every aspect of life. The sun, the stars, the rhythm of time, the cycle of seasons, all are expressions of Krishna. To recognize this is to live in constant awareness, where even the ordinary becomes sacred. The cosmic vision is an invitation to see divinity everywhere. Arjuna's response to the vision is deeply human. He is awestruck, frightened, humbled, and reverent. He apologizes for treating Krishna as a friend in the past, unaware of his true nature. This shift marks the turning point in Arjuna's spiritual journey. He no longer relates to Krishna as an equal or companion, but as the source of all life. His surrender becomes total, not because he is forced, but because he now sees clearly. The Gita uses this moment to emphasize that true surrender comes through knowledge and realization, not submission to authority. The soul bows naturally when it sees what is real and eternal. The narrative of the cosmic vision also serves as a mirror for the reader or listener. It challenges one to consider the limits of perception and the assumptions about control, identity, and morality. If, like Arjuna, one could see the vast interconnectedness of all things, how would life be lived differently? The vision pushes the mind beyond dualities. success and failure, friend and foe, life and death, and opens a space where the soul can act from a deeper source. It does not erase responsibility, but reshapes it. The Gita's wisdom suggests that seeing the divine in all things leads to wiser, more compassionate, and fearless action. The moment Krishna reveals his universal form is both the climax of the Gita and a turning point for Arjuna's inner world. The outward war remains, but the inner conflict dissolves. Armed now not just with weapons but with insight, Arjuna is ready to act, not out of anger, ambition, or fear, but from harmony with truth. This readiness is the true liberation the Gita seeks to offer. The battle becomes a metaphor for the challenges of life, and the vision becomes a reminder of the eternal context in which those challenges unfold. It is this knowledge that transforms action into yoga and life into a spiritual journey. This is how the Bhagavad Gita reveals the cosmos within the divine mouth, awakening Arjuna to the infinite within the finite. Part 6. Dharma and Duty. Can right and wrong change with context? In the Bhagavad Gita, the concept of dharma, often translated as duty, righteousness, or moral order, is one of the central pillars of its philosophical teachings. Dharma is not a fixed or rigid law that applies equally in all situations, but a nuanced and contextual path that reflects the nature, role, and responsibilities of the individual. Arjuna's inner crisis at the beginning of the Gita stems from his confusion about what Dharma demands of him. As a warrior, he is called to fight. But as a human being with emotions and relationships, he hesitates. He fears that fighting will lead to the destruction of family, tradition, and life itself. This tension between personal values and social obligation forces him to ask whether right and wrong are absolute or relative to circumstance. Krishna responds to Arjuna's hesitation not with a simplistic answer, but with a deep exploration of what it means to follow one's dharma. He emphasizes that Arjuna's personal sorrow, while real, cannot override his greater duty as a kshatriya or warrior. It is Arjuna's role in society to protect justice, and in the context of a just war, abstaining from action would be a greater sin than participating. This position introduces a moral structure where context plays a crucial role. Killing, in and of itself, is not glorified, but when performed as part of a duty aligned with a higher order, it takes on a different meaning. Thus, the Gita begins to show how dharma is shaped not only by action, but by role, intention, and alignment with cosmic balance. The Gita's approach to dharma challenges black and white thinking. Right and wrong are not universal categories applied blindly across all situations. Instead, they must be understood in relation to the person's position in life, their temperament, and their responsibilities. Krishna makes it clear that everyone has their own swadharma, their unique personal duty based on their nature and role. He states that it is better to fail in one's own dharma than to succeed in another's. This teaching honors individual authenticity and warns against imitation. Each person has a path uniquely suited to them, and straying from it leads not only to external failure but also to internal disintegration. Dharma is dynamic, not static. It responds to the needs of the time, the structure of society, and the evolution of the individual soul. Arjuna's dilemma reveals this dynamism. What might be considered wrong in one situation, killing one's kin, can become right in another if it serves the greater good and sustains dharma itself. This flexible understanding of moral action demands discernment. Krishna's teachings do not offer easy answers, but cultivate inner wisdom that can navigate complexity. Dharma becomes less about following rules and more about aligning with a deeper truth, a sense of responsibility to the self, others, and the divine order of things. The Gita also introduces the idea that inaction can be a form of adharma, or unrighteousness. Arjuna initially believes that by withdrawing from battle he is choosing peace and virtue. But Krishna shows him that inaction, when it stems from fear, confusion, or avoidance, is itself a failure of duty. To do nothing in the face of injustice is not morally superior. It can be morally disastrous. In the Gita's framework, what matters is not simply the act, but the motivation behind it. If one acts without selfish desire, without attachment to results, and from a place of inner clarity, then even difficult actions become righteous. This leads to the concept of detached action. Krishna teaches Arjuna to perform his dharma without attachment to success or failure. When one acts purely out of duty, not driven by ego or desire, one transcends karma. This is the foundation of karma yoga. The performance of dharma becomes a spiritual discipline. Right action is not about guaranteeing good outcomes, but about purifying the mind and fulfilling one's role in the greater whole. This teaching is liberating because it removes the burden of outcome from the individual. One is only responsible for the sincerity and integrity of effort, not for how the world responds to it. The Gita does not ignore the emotional cost of duty. Arjuna's pain is honored and addressed, not dismissed. Krishna acknowledges that dharma can sometimes demand great personal sacrifice. There is no illusion that duty is always comfortable or easy. What the Gita offers is not escape from moral conflict, but the courage to act within it. Arjuna is asked to transcend personal emotion, not by denying it, but by anchoring himself in something greater. This inner grounding comes from recognizing the eternal self, the Atman, which is untouched by birth and death, joy and sorrow. When action flows from this higher awareness, dharma becomes both a responsibility and a form of liberation. The flexibility of dharma in the Gita has led to varied interpretations over centuries. Some see it as reinforcing social hierarchies, such as caste roles. Others interpret it as a call to individual self-realization beyond rigid structures. Krishna's insistence on Arjuna following his kshatriya dharma must be read in the context of Arjuna's own nature and life purpose. The message is not that everyone must fight or follow tradition blindly, but that one must honor the path that aligns with their inner nature and social role. True dharma arises from inner clarity and outer necessity. It does not reject change, but requires deep reflection before action. The Gita also teaches that dharma evolves with spiritual growth. What is appropriate for a beginner may not suit an advanced seeker. As one becomes more self-aware, the definition of duty becomes more subtle and interior. Eventually, Krishna tells Arjuna to surrender all varieties of dharma and simply take refuge in him. This ultimate teaching points beyond moral codes to spiritual surrender. At the highest level, dharma becomes a movement of the soul toward union with the divine. Actions continue, but the ego is dissolved. The individual no longer acts out of obligation, but from unity with the divine will. This surrender is not passivity, but the highest form of active engagement. By exploring dharma in this way, the Gita offers a moral framework that balances individual integrity with cosmic responsibility. It acknowledges that life is filled with ethical gray zones, where duty is not always obvious, and right action must be discerned. The goal is not to create perfect outcomes, but to act in a way that sustains inner harmony and external order. The person who follows dharma becomes a stabilizing force in society and a light to others. Their life becomes a living teaching, where values are expressed not through preaching, but through disciplined, compassionate, and courageous action. Dharma in the Gita is also deeply connected with the idea of sacrifice. To follow Dharma often means giving up personal gain, comfort, or security for a higher cause. This sacrifice is not seen as loss, but as offering. When actions are performed as offerings to the divine, even the most difficult duties become meaningful. The Gita transforms sacrifice from something painful into something sacred. It redefines strength not as dominance, but as the willingness to uphold truth even at personal cost. Arjuna, by the end of his journey, embodies this strength, not because his doubts are erased, but because his commitment to truth has matured. The Gita does not promise that following Dharma will lead to worldly success. Arjuna is not told he will win the war because he is right. He is told to act rightly regardless of the outcome. This teaching challenges modern ideas of ethics that often equate moral correctness with victory or reward. In the Gita's philosophy, Dharma is its own reward. It brings inner peace and aligns the individual with the order of the universe. Even if the world misunderstands or opposes you, if you act in accordance with your Dharma, your soul remains at peace. This is the quiet, enduring power of righteousness. Ultimately, the Gita teaches that Dharma is not a fixed script, but a living dialogue between the soul and the world. It requires courage, reflection, and above all, surrender to a wisdom beyond the ego. Arjuna's transformation comes not from finding a perfect answer, but from rising into a deeper understanding of his purpose. In that understanding, he regains his strength and chooses to fight, not with anger or ambition, but with clarity and devotion. His return to action is not a return to violence, but a return to self. Through Arjuna, the Gita shows that the question is not whether right and wrong change with context, but how we change as we grow into deeper responsibility. This is how the Bhagavad Gita reveals Dharma, not as rigid law, but as a living, evolving compass for the soul. Part 7. Self-realization. You are not this body, so who are you? In the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most fundamental and repeated teachings is the idea that we are not the body. Krishna reminds Arjuna that what we commonly identify with, our form, name, roles, and even emotions, is not the true self. These aspects are temporary, constantly changing, and subject to decay. The body ages, the mind fluctuates, and circumstances shift, but the real self remains untouched. Krishna calls this real self the Atman, the eternal essence that neither kills nor can be killed, that is never born and never dies. This truth lies at the heart of self-realization. To know who we are beyond the physical and mental layers is to wake up from a deep illusion and begin to live in alignment with what is unchanging. When Arjuna hesitates on the battlefield, it is because he is overwhelmed by fear, sorrow, and attachment. He sees bodies, his relatives, teachers, and friends, and cannot bear the thought of their destruction. Krishna uses this moment to guide him toward a higher perspective. He explains that the soul simply changes bodies, just as a person changes clothes. Death is not the end, but a transition. Realizing this truth allows Arjuna to step beyond his temporary emotions and understand the deeper process of life and existence. The soul, Krishna says, is never harmed by weapons, nor burned by fire, nor dried by wind. It is unbreakable, eternal, and beyond the reach of the senses. This teaching shifts the entire framework of how one sees life and death. The realization that we are not the body challenges the foundation of most human experience. So much of our fear, desire, and identity is tied to bodily existence. We crave comfort, fear, pain, seek beauty, and dread aging. But Krishna asks us to look inward and identify with the witness, the one who observes all experiences without being bound by them. This witness, the Atman, is pure consciousness. It is not what happens to the body, but the awareness behind it. Through meditation, self-inquiry, and detachment, one can gradually shift identification from the changing body-mind to the unchanging self. This shift is not just intellectual, it transforms how one lives, relates, and acts. Self-realization in the Gita is not escape from life, but a way of engaging with it from truth. When a person knows they are not the body, they no longer act out of fear or ego. They act from clarity, compassion, and inner freedom. Krishna calls such a person a sthita prajna, one who remains steady in wisdom, regardless of external conditions. Whether honored or insulted, in pleasure or pain, such a person remains rooted in the self. This equanimity is not suppression of emotion, but liberation from its tyranny. Self-realization brings a calm center to life's constant movement, allowing one to respond wisely rather than react blindly. The question arises, if I am not this body or personality, who am I? Krishna answers not with a rigid definition, but through poetic descriptions. He says the self is the light of all lights, the unborn, the unmanifest, the eternal witness seated in the heart of all beings. It is not grasped by the senses, but known through direct experience. Self-realization is therefore not belief, but awakening. It is like remembering something forgotten, recognizing what has always been present. Krishna emphasizes that this knowledge is the highest, the most purifying, and the most liberating. To know the self is to become fearless, joyful, and free from sorrow. The path to self-realization requires a disciplined mind. The senses, constantly pulled outward, must be turned inward. The mind, restless and distracted, must be calmed through meditation, reflection, and devotion. Krishna teaches that through practice and detachment, the mind becomes still like a lamp in a windless place. In that stillness, the self reveals itself, not as a concept, but as presence. This inner journey is subtle and often challenging, but it is the only path that leads to lasting peace. External pleasures come and go, but the bliss of the self is ever present once realized. It is the source of true happiness and the end of all seeking. Self-realization also brings a radical equality of vision. Krishna says that one who sees the self in all beings and all beings in the self becomes truly wise. Such a person does not harm others, because they no longer see others as separate. They see the divine in every form, the same light shining through many windows. This vision dissolves hatred, envy, and division. It replaces them with love, respect, and unity. The realized soul becomes a living embodiment of compassion and service, acting in the world without attachment, guided not by personal desire, but by universal truth. The Gita's teaching of self-realization integrates well with its other paths, karma, bhakti, and jnana. The karma yogi acts without attachment, knowing that the self is untouched by success or failure. The bhakta loves the divine as the self of all, finding unity through devotion. The meditator turns inward to discover the silent presence within. All these paths ultimately lead to the same realization, that the true self is not this limited form, but the infinite consciousness from which all arises. Krishna emphasizes that no effort is wasted, and even a little progress on this path protects one from great fear. The journey is gradual but sure, and the destination is within. Krishna also distinguishes between the lower self, the ego mind, and the higher self, the Atman. The lower self is entangled in desires, fears, and attachments. It defines itself through success, failure, reputation, and relationships. The higher self is free, pure, and silent. Self-realization is the process of shifting identification from the lower to the higher. This shift does not mean the ego disappears, but that it no longer rules. One begins to live from the depth of being rather than the surface of personality. This brings peace, clarity, and strength. The world remains the same, but one's relationship to it is transformed. The practical result of self-realization is freedom, not freedom to do whatever one wants, but freedom from compulsion. One becomes free from fear of death, from craving, from the need to prove oneself. This inner freedom expresses as calm joy, quiet strength, and unshakable peace. The realized soul still plays their role in the world, but without being bound by it. Krishna uses the metaphor of the lotus leaf, which touches water but is not wetted by it. Similarly, the self-realized person moves through the world but remains untouched by its turmoil. This is the ideal of the Gita, a human being fully engaged yet fully free. Another key insight Krishna shares is that self-realization is not something to be acquired from outside. It is already present, already the core of who we are. The only obstacle is ignorance, mistaking the body and mind for the self. This ignorance creates suffering, fear, and confusion. The moment it is removed through knowledge, the self shines forth by itself, like the sun emerging from behind the clouds. This is why the Gita places such emphasis on right understanding. Right action and devotion are powerful, but when guided by wisdom, they become complete. The end of the Gita's teaching is not more knowledge, but knowing oneself as that which knows. The process of realizing the self also involves letting go of false identities. We often define ourselves by our roles, achievements, nationality, gender, or relationships. While these may be part of our human experience, they are not the essence of who we are. Krishna gently dismantles each of these identifications, showing that they are impermanent and external. The true self lies beneath them, silent and observing. To reach it, one must peel back the layers of conditioning, opinion, and belief. This is not a rejection of the world, but a deepening of awareness. It is a movement inward, not away, toward the center of being. Krishna also warns of the obstacles on this path. Restlessness, doubt, and attachment are strong forces. The mind resists stillness, and the ego resists surrender. But he reassures Arjuna that through steady practice and trust, these obstacles can be overcome. No sincere effort is ever wasted. Even if one falters, the growth remains and will continue in future lives. Self-realization is not a race, but a return. It is the most personal and yet the most universal of journeys. It is a journey not to another place, but to our own heart, our own truth, our own eternal nature. As Arjuna listens, something within him begins to shift. The fear that once ruled him gives way to a deeper understanding. He realizes that his confusion came from identifying with the temporary. With Krishna's guidance, he begins to remember who he is beyond name, role, and emotion. This remembrance is the beginning of liberation. The battlefield no longer represents only war, but the field of life itself, with all its challenges and questions. Self-realization does not remove these challenges, but changes the one who faces them. Arjuna, now rooted in his higher self, stands ready, not as a warrior lost in conflict, but as a soul awakened to truth. This is how the Bhagavad Gita teaches self-realization, not as an escape from the body, but as a discovery of the eternal self within it. Part 8. Death and Rebirth. What the Gita really says about the soul. In the Bhagavad Gita, the subject of death and rebirth is not treated with fear or finality, but with philosophical clarity and spiritual insight. Krishna explains to Arjuna that what truly dies is not the self, but the physical form through which the self temporarily expresses itself. The soul, or Atman, is eternal, beyond time and change, untouched by the processes of birth and death. This teaching appears early in the Gita, as Krishna seeks to calm Arjuna's despair. The idea is simple but revolutionary. You do not die because you were never born in the way the body is born. You are the witness of all transitions, the unchanging reality behind the drama of life. With this understanding, fear dissolves and death becomes a doorway rather than an end. Krishna describes the soul as unborn, eternal, indestructible, and immutable. He compares the process of dying to changing clothes. Just as a person discards old garments and puts on new ones, the soul leaves behind a worn-out body and takes on another. This metaphor is not just poetic. It reveals a core concept in Hindu philosophy, samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Each life is one chapter in a longer journey of the soul's evolution towards self-realization and liberation. Death does not mark a conclusion, but a continuation. The actions taken in each life, guided by karma, determine the next form the soul will inhabit. This view places moral responsibility on the individual, since present choices shape future experiences. The Gita's view of death removes the sting of fear by situating it within a grander cosmic rhythm. What seems like loss is in fact transition. The soul, being eternal, carries its impressions from one life to the next. These impressions, or samskaras, are subtle tendencies shaped by thoughts, actions, and desires. They influence the circumstances of rebirth, including body, family, environment, and inner disposition. Krishna makes it clear that while the soul is changeless, the personality and experiences around it shift in accordance with karma. This teaching calls for a deeper kind of accountability. It is not only what we do, but the spirit in which we do it that carries weight beyond this lifetime. The moment of death holds special significance in the Gita. Krishna tells Arjuna that the state of consciousness at the time of death determines the nature of the next birth. If the mind is focused on divine thoughts or centered in the self, liberation becomes possible. If the mind is entangled in worldly attachments or fear, then the soul may continue in the cycle of samsara. This teaching places emphasis on spiritual practice throughout life. It is not enough to seek God in old age or only at death. The habits of thought and heart developed over a lifetime shape the soul's trajectory. Therefore, daily remembrance, discipline, and devotion are forms of preparation for death. Krishna assures Arjuna that those who dedicate their lives to spiritual realization do not perish, even if they falter. If someone makes sincere effort but dies before reaching enlightenment, their spiritual momentum carries forward. They are reborn into circumstances that favor their continued growth. This view offers deep encouragement. No effort is lost. The soul is never punished in a final or eternal sense, but is always moving toward realization, even through cycles of mistake and correction. This approach eliminates the fear of failure and replaces it with a sense of evolutionary purpose. The Gita does not offer condemnation but compassion, emphasizing that the divine is patient and ever-present. The soul's journey is not random or mechanical. It is guided by the divine intelligence of the cosmos, which Krishna personifies. He declares that he resides in the heart of all beings and directs the wanderings of the soul according to karma and divine will. This statement balances personal responsibility with divine guidance. The soul is not abandoned in a chaotic universe, but is lovingly guided. Krishna tells Arjuna that those who remember him, think of him with love and devotion, and align their actions with truth, will ultimately come to him. Rebirth, then, is not a punishment, but an opportunity, an invitation to continue refining, understanding, and awakening. Krishna distinguishes between different types of death. For the ignorant, death is a cause of fear and sorrow, because they are attached to the body and its pleasures. For the wise, death is accepted as part of the divine order. The soul, having no attachment to form, does not grieve over its departure. This detachment is not coldness, but a profound peace born of understanding. The Gita teaches that grieving is natural, but excessive grief arises from confusion about identity. When one identifies with the eternal self, the events of the body, including death, are seen with equanimity. This does not mean that love disappears, but that love is directed beyond the temporary shell to the eternal being within. The Gita also addresses the process of attaining liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth. This liberation, called moksha, is the soul's final release from samsara. It occurs when the soul realizes its unity with the divine and no longer identifies with the body or ego. Krishna explains that those who know him in truth, not just as a deity but as the infinite, unborn, and eternal source, are not reborn. They merge with his being, beyond the realms of suffering and time. This is not annihilation, but union. The soul does not cease to exist. Rather, it awakens to its real nature and dwells in eternal peace and knowledge. Another layer of the Gita's teaching on death and rebirth involves the nature of time. Krishna reveals that all beings exist in time, but he himself is beyond it. Time is the field in which birth and death occur, but the self exists beyond time's reach. This teaching helps place human life into perspective. Everything born must die, but the soul does not belong to the world of beginnings and ends. It is the silent witness, unchanged across countless lifetimes. Recognizing this helps one rise above the illusion of urgency and fear. It invites a life of deeper purpose, where time is used not just for pleasure or gain, but for remembering who we truly are. The teaching that the soul is never destroyed also has profound ethical implications. If the soul is eternal and passes through many lives, then each being is a carrier of divine essence. This understanding leads to greater compassion, patience, and nonviolence. Krishna does not encourage reckless action or justification of harm. Rather, his emphasis on the eternal soul is meant to calm fear and sharpen discernment. It is easier to act with detachment when one knows that nothing essential is ever lost. This clarity allows action to be taken wisely and justly, without paralyzing doubt or emotional turmoil. In this way, the Gita blends metaphysical insight with practical wisdom. Krishna also speaks of different destinations for the soul based on one's inner orientation. Those who are bound by desire and ignorance are drawn to lower states of existence. Those who live with virtue, devotion, and knowledge ascend to higher realms. But even the pleasures of heaven are temporary. The only permanent state is union with the divine. Therefore, Krishna urges Arjuna not to seek temporary gains, but to strive for liberation. This teaching refines the spiritual goal. It is not enough to be moral or religious, The highest aim is to know the self and transcend the cycle altogether. Death is not avoided, but outgrown through realization. The Gita repeatedly reminds the reader that self-realization is the key to transforming one's experience of death and rebirth. When a person identifies with the soul rather than the body, fear of death fades. When one sees that the self was never born, then the death of the body is no longer a tragedy but a natural shift. This realization does not remove the pain of separation, but brings meaning and acceptance to it. For the soul, each lifetime is a classroom. Each death is graduation to the next lesson. The one who knows this lives with dignity and dies with grace, ready for whatever comes next or beyond. Even the moment of death can be a moment of liberation. Krishna teaches that if a person fixes their mind on the divine at the time of passing, they attain freedom. This moment becomes a test of awareness, not merely of ritual. The one who remembers God in love and surrender dies into light, not darkness. But this remembrance is not possible without lifelong practice. Hence, the Gita encourages daily cultivation of divine awareness, so that the mind naturally turns toward God in the final moment. The end of life then becomes a conscious transition, not a loss of control, and a doorway to the infinite, not a falling into the unknown. Ultimately, the Gita's teachings on death and rebirth aim to liberate the human being from the fear that dominates life. It does not glorify death, nor deny its difficulty. Rather, it places it within a broader spiritual vision, where each soul is on a timeless journey toward awakening. Through clarity, devotion, right action, and self-inquiry, the soul moves closer to its source. Rebirth is not a punishment, but a path. Death is not destruction, but renewal. The eternal self moves through these changes like the sky through passing clouds, untouched, ever-present, and serene. This is how the Bhagavad Gita explains death, not as the end, but as part of the soul's eternal journey toward truth. Part 9. Detachment in Action. Why the Gita is a manual for modern leaders. The Bhagavad Gita, though born in the ancient setting of a battlefield, remains strikingly relevant for leaders in today's world. At the heart of its teachings is the principle of detached action, the art of performing one's duty with full commitment, while remaining free from the anxiety of results. For leaders navigating complex decisions, competing interests, and constant pressure, this idea becomes a powerful guide. Krishna teaches Arjuna to act according to his dharma without concern for victory or defeat, gain or loss. Such detachment does not imply indifference, but clarity. It enables leaders to stay focused on their purpose, respond wisely to uncertainty, and avoid being consumed by ego or fear of failure. This centered approach fosters resilience, ethics, and vision. A modern leader must constantly make choices under high stakes, often without knowing how things will turn out. The Gita addresses this very dilemma. Krishna reminds Arjuna that the right course of action is not always the most comfortable, and outcomes are never fully under our control. What is in our hands is effort, discipline, and intention. A leader who adopts this mindset will not be paralyzed by uncertainty or swayed by personal ambition. They act out of responsibility rather than desire, service rather than self-interest. In today's volatile environments, such inner detachment becomes a shield against burnout, impulsive decisions, and moral compromise. It allows leaders to act with strength and serenity, regardless of results. One of the Gita's key lessons is that the ego often interferes with effective leadership. The ego seeks recognition, power, and control, but the Gita encourages the leader to become a servant of a higher goal. Krishna tells Arjuna that one should not see themselves as the doer of action, but as an instrument of the divine will. This teaching liberates the leader from the burden of pride and the fear of blame. In practical terms, it means putting the mission above personal glory, listening more than asserting, and acting not for applause but for the right cause. This kind of leadership is rare, but deeply impactful. It earns trust and inspires collective effort. The modern leader often faces dilemmas where both choices appear right or wrong in different ways. The Gita does not pretend that every decision will be clear-cut. Instead, it offers a framework for making decisions rooted in inner ethics and higher awareness. When Arjuna is torn between love for his family and duty to justice, Krishna helps him rise above personal preference. Similarly, a leader today must sometimes act in ways that are painful but necessary, such as making layoffs to save a company, or challenging popular opinion for a greater good. Detachment allows such decisions to be made with compassion and clarity, not emotional bias or avoidance. A detached leader is not passive or aloof. Detachment in the Gita means full engagement without being enslaved by outcomes. It is dynamic and balanced. A person who practices detached action gives their best effort, plans wisely, consults others, and stays involved, but remains inwardly free. They are not shattered by failure or inflated by success. This kind of balance is crucial in high-pressure roles. It creates a calm center amid chaos, allowing consistent performance and steady guidance. People naturally look up to such individuals because they radiate stability, not desperation. This is not coldness, but maturity. It allows for empathy without emotional exhaustion, action without ego. Krishna emphasizes that detachment is not lack of emotion, but mastery over it. Leaders often carry the emotional weight of their teams, organizations, or nations. Without detachment, this weight can become overwhelming. The Gita teaches that feelings should be acknowledged, but not allowed to dominate reason. A leader who understands this can respond to crises with clarity rather than panic. They can hold space for others' emotions without becoming drained or reactive. This emotional maturity stems from inner alignment with purpose. When the leader knows why they serve, their emotional strength becomes a quiet source of courage for others. It uplifts rather than burdens the group. The Gita also cautions against being driven by desire for rewards. In the modern world, leadership is often linked to success metrics, profit, fame, popularity, and influence. But Krishna warns that attachment to such fruits leads to restlessness and bondage. A leader constantly chasing external success loses sight of long-term vision and ethical grounding. The Gita calls instead for sustained excellence, guided by Dharma. This allows for consistent, value-driven action. Success may follow, but it is not the obsession. When leaders operate from this place, they create organizations rooted in purpose, not just performance. Such leadership endures beyond fads, crises, or short-term wins. The Gita's emphasis on swadharma, or personal duty, is another cornerstone of leadership wisdom. Every leader must know their strengths, limitations, and role. Trying to imitate another's path leads to confusion and ineffectiveness. Krishna tells Arjuna it is better to fail in one's own dharma than succeed in another's. For leaders, this means leading in a way that aligns with their core values, character, and context. Authentic leadership stems from knowing oneself deeply. It allows for natural authority rather than forced command. Detachment supports this self-awareness by reducing the need to prove oneself. When a leader is no longer performing for approval, they begin to lead from truth. The Gita's teachings on the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are also relevant for leadership. These qualities shape human behavior. Sattva brings clarity and harmony, rajas brings ambition and activity, and tamas brings inertia. A good leader cultivates sattva through reflection, learning, and service. Rajas can be harnessed for motivation, but if unchecked, it leads to restlessness. Tamas must be transformed into action. Understanding these qualities helps leaders manage their inner world and guide others wisely. A detached leader can observe these forces without being ruled by them. They can adjust their approach, support their team's growth, and maintain balance in dynamic environments. A vital part of detached leadership is the ability to let go. Not all plans will succeed, not all efforts will be recognized, and not all relationships will last. Krishna teaches Arjuna to act wholeheartedly and then release the outcome. This practice cultivates deep patience and perspective. Leaders who can let go are not weakened. They are free to adapt, learn, and move forward. They are not trapped by the past or future, but remain anchored in the present task. Such leaders are more innovative and less afraid to take bold steps, because their identity is not tied to results. They lead from the center, not the edge of fear. The Gita also upholds the importance of inner life. A detached leader must invest in their own spiritual and mental development. This means carving out time for reflection, silence, and realignment with purpose. Krishna recommends practices such as meditation, devotion, study, and disciplined living. For a modern leader, these translate into mindfulness, ethical grounding, continuous learning, and personal integrity. Without this inner work, detachment becomes difficult. The outer world's noise easily overwhelms. But with a strong inner foundation, a leader becomes unshakable. They serve not from emptiness, but from fullness. Their decisions reflect clarity, their actions inspire trust, and their presence uplifts those around them. Even in failure, the Gita offers comfort. Krishna assures Arjuna that no sincere effort is ever wasted. A detached leader sees failure not as defeat, but as feedback. It becomes part of the learning curve, not the end of the journey. This resilience is vital in leadership, where not every risk pays off, and not every vision comes to life. Detachment helps leaders rise quickly, reflect honestly, and keep moving. It prevents the ego from turning failure into shame or success into arrogance. Instead, each experience becomes a lesson, each challenge a teacher. Over time, this attitude builds wisdom and humility, the true marks of great leadership. In crises, the value of detachment becomes even more visible. A leader under stress must think clearly, act decisively, and remain emotionally stable. The Gita provides tools for cultivating this mindset. Detachment allows one to remain grounded amid chaos, to hear many voices without losing direction, to hold pain without being consumed by it. It turns reaction into response, panic into presence. Krishna shows that true leadership is spiritual at its core. It is not about dominating others, but mastering oneself. It is not about outcomes, but alignment with truth. The detached leader becomes a channel of calm and courage in uncertain times. The Gita also reminds leaders to remember the bigger picture. Life, success, and legacy are all temporary. The soul endures, but roles change. This awareness reduces the grip of ego and helps leaders act from a place of service. Detachment sharpens vision because it removes the fog of personal agenda. The leader sees what truly matters: people, values, impact, and integrity. In the end, detached action does not reduce performance, but elevates it. It allows for deeper engagement, wiser decisions, and sustainable leadership. It nurtures organizations and societies rooted in balance and guided by purpose, not just profit or pressure. This is how the Bhagavad Gita becomes a manual for modern leaders, teaching detachment not as escape, but as the highest form of responsible action. Part 10. The Three Gunas, the invisible forces shaping your life. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna introduces the concept of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, as the fundamental qualities of nature that influence all beings. These three forces are not external entities but inherent tendencies present in every individual, shaping thoughts, behaviors, preferences, and even one's path in life. They exist in various combinations, constantly interacting and fluctuating. Sattva represents purity, clarity, and harmony. Rajas stands for activity, desire, and restlessness. Tamas embodies inertia, ignorance, and darkness. Krishna teaches that by understanding these gunas and how they operate, a person can gain mastery over their life. The gunas are not good or bad by themselves, but the degree to which one is dominated by them determines the level of awareness and quality of action in daily experience. Sattva is the guna of balance and illumination. When sattva predominates, a person feels light, peaceful, joyful, and clear-minded. They are inclined toward truth, knowledge, compassion, and ethical conduct. Sattvic individuals are drawn to spiritual study, selfless service, and inner reflection. Their actions are performed without selfish desire and lead to purity and growth. Krishna says that sattva binds the soul through attachment to happiness and knowledge. Even this higher quality, when not transcended, can still limit liberation. However, sattva is the most conducive state for spiritual progress. It provides the clarity and stability needed to recognize deeper truths. While it too is part of nature and thus must be eventually transcended, it is the state closest to liberation and the doorway to higher consciousness. Rajas, the guna of passion and activity, drives desire, ambition, and movement. When rajas dominates, a person becomes restless, driven by goals, caught in emotions, and often preoccupied with results. Rajas fuels effort and can lead to worldly success, but it also generates dissatisfaction, stress, and attachment. Krishna explains that rajasic action is motivated by craving for reward, and its result is sorrow and fatigue. In leadership, relationships, or work, rajas often shows up as competitiveness, anxiety, and constant striving. It is not inherently wrong, but it lacks stillness. While rajas can push a person forward, it rarely offers peace. It must be understood and eventually balanced by the wisdom and clarity of sattva. Tamas is the guna of darkness, inertia, and delusion. It brings confusion, procrastination, laziness, and resistance to growth. When tamas predominates, the mind becomes clouded, the will weak, and the soul disconnected from purpose. Krishna describes tamasic actions as those done out of ignorance, without consideration of consequences, and often leading to harm. People dominated by tamas may avoid responsibility, cling to destructive habits, or feel stuck in fear and doubt. It binds the soul through forgetfulness and apathy. However, even tamas has a role. In certain moments, it can provide rest and recovery. The key is not to be ruled by it. The Gita encourages rising out of tamas by cultivating awareness, engaging in purposeful action, and seeking knowledge. The interplay of the three gunas is constant and subtle. They do not exist in isolation, but in varying combinations within all people and at all times. A person may feel sattvic in the morning, rajasic in the afternoon, and tamasic at night. Similarly, different environments, foods, relationships, and even music can increase or reduce these qualities. The Gita's wisdom lies in helping individuals become conscious of these patterns and to make choices that support sattvic living. Krishna teaches that those who observe the gunas without being entangled in them can rise above them. This transcendence is the path to true freedom, where the soul is no longer shaped by nature but established in the self. Understanding the gunas helps in developing emotional intelligence. When a person recognizes a surge of rajas, like anger or impatience, they can pause and redirect energy. When they notice tamas, such as boredom or despair, they can activate themselves through service or study. When sattva arises, through love or insight, they can nourish it through meditation or gratitude. The gunas offer a map of inner life. Rather than being confused or reactive, one begins to see the root of their moods and behaviors. This awareness allows for more deliberate action. The Gita presents this understanding not as a theory, but as a tool for practical living, grounded in observation and self-awareness. Krishna also links the gunas to types of food, behavior, and worship. Sattvic food is pure, fresh, nourishing, and promotes clarity and peace. Rajasic food is spicy, salty, or bitter, creating stimulation and restlessness. Tamasic food is stale, impure, or heavy, dulling the mind and body. By choosing what we consume with awareness, we influence our mental and emotional state. Similarly, sattvic behavior includes self-control, kindness, and truthfulness. Rajasic behavior involves competition, showiness, and ambition. Tamasic behavior includes carelessness, deceit, and neglect. Even forms of worship can reflect the gunas. Worship done with devotion and humility is sattvic. When done for display or gain, it is rajasic. If performed blindly or out of fear, it is tamasic. The gunas also shape how we understand success and failure. A sattvic person sees success as fulfillment of duty and failure as a lesson, not as personal identity. They remain balanced. A rajasic person ties their worth to achievements and is disturbed by loss. A tamasic person may not pursue goals or may blame others. Krishna teaches that the wise one sees all action as the play of the gunas and remains unaffected. They act, but their self is not bound to the results. This detachment, born of understanding, leads to inner stability. It is not indifference but freedom. The Gita offers this insight so that one may rise above suffering, which is always linked to identification with the transient. The journey to transcend the gunas is not about suppression but transformation. Tamas is overcome by activity, learning, and service. Rajas is refined by surrendering ambition and cultivating calm. Sattva is transcended by letting go of even the subtlest attachment to joy or virtue. Eventually, the seeker reaches a state beyond the gunas, gunatita, where they are no longer identified with any quality of nature. Krishna describes such a person as unaffected by praise or blame, heat or cold, pleasure or pain. They remain firm in wisdom, equal to all, rooted in the self. This state does not remove them from life, but allows them to live with complete freedom, love, and clarity. The gunas also affect the mind's relationship with time. Tamas is tied to the past, filled with regret and clinging. Rajas is obsessed with the future, anxious and restless. Sattva lives in the present, content and aware. A person aligned with sattva accepts what is, makes peace with what was, and works without obsession toward what may come. The Gita does not ask us to artificially suppress rajas or tamas, but to gradually bring more sattva into our lives through choice and discipline. When sattva becomes dominant, it creates the right conditions for spiritual insight, devotion, and eventually liberation. Thus, even though the gunas bind the soul, they can also be used as steps to rise beyond bondage. The awareness of the gunas also fosters humility. One begins to see that much of one's behavior is conditioned by forces beyond personal control. This does not mean abandoning responsibility, but it does reduce arrogance and blame. We stop taking pride in our achievements or judging others harshly. Instead, we seek to understand, to uplift, and to evolve. A sattvic leader, for instance, supports growth in others. A rajasic one seeks domination. A tamasic one avoids responsibility. Understanding these tendencies allows one to build stronger teams, healthier relationships, and a more conscious life. The Gita's insight into the gunas thus applies not only to individual growth, but to social harmony. As Krishna guides Arjuna through the complexity of life, he repeatedly points back to the self beyond the gunas. That self, the Atman, is not touched by any of these forces. It watches them like clouds in the sky, but remains the clear space behind them. To realize this self is the ultimate goal. The gunas are tools to help navigate the relative world, but self-realization takes one beyond all relativity. Krishna tells Arjuna that those who reach this realization attain immortality, freedom from birth and death, and union with the divine. The gunas are part of Prakriti, or nature, but the self belongs to Purusha, the eternal consciousness. The teachings on the gunas help bridge philosophy and psychology. They offer an inner vocabulary for understanding our emotions, reactions, and choices. Instead of labeling ourselves as good or bad, we begin to notice the play of qualities within. This makes transformation possible. We can shift from tamas to rajas, from rajas to sattva, and finally from sattva to transcendence. The process is gradual but powerful. Every decision, from how we wake up to how we speak, becomes an opportunity to cultivate higher qualities. The Gita does not impose rules, but awakens the desire to live with wisdom. This is the quiet revolution of understanding the gunas. This is how the Bhagavad Gita reveals the three gunas as the invisible forces shaping your life and the keys to transcendence.